Good day. I am Rhea A. Mandantas, and together with Anali Mendez, Loelin Menyoza, Carlito Palacios Jr., and Jessa Kitoy, we are the fourth group to tackle about the life and works of Rizal. And our topic will be about Frailocracy, Secularization Controversy, and GOMBURZA. By the end of the report, the students shall be able to examine the different factors that shape the religious practices during Rizal's time. Second, apply the word secularization to the Philippines situation in 19th century and relate it in today's generation for the students to see the difference. And then third, differentiate a regular priest and a secular priest to enlighten the minds of the student. Frailocracy or Frailocracia. Now, what is Frailocracy? It is basically a government run under the supervision of friars. Friars are the Spaniard priests, such as Augustinians, Dominicans, and Franciscans. Now, as the friars practically ruled over the Philippines, they ruled it in a facade of civil government, which means something, and I will explain it to you later. The Philippines under Frailocracy, it started when, during the Legazpi expedition, reached the Philippines by the year 1565, and then followed by the Augustinians and Franciscans, which happened in 1577, Jesuits in 1581, Dominicans in 1587, and Recollects in 1601, and the last batch of the priests to arrive are the Benedictines, which happened in 1895. So it was a pretty long term for them to rule over the Philippines. Now, almost every town in the archipelago except the unpacified Islamic Mindanao Islands and Sulu. So basically, from Visayas to Luzon, it was ruled by friars. Now, as I have mentioned earlier that the Philippines was ruled through a facade of civil government, it's because this government, Frailocracy, had two faces. It has a good side and a bad side. In the good side, there has been an introduction of Christianity, and the second one is the European civilization. However, in the bad side, there are a lot of abuses of the friars.
Good day everyone, I am the second reporter and I am Jessa Aikitoy, and my discussion is about abuses of the friars. So first is excessive church fees. Simony or buying and selling of something spiritual are closely connected with the spiritual. Friars would schedule a fee to be charged for baptism, wedding, funeral, and other ceremonies in the church. So excessive church fees. Friars would appoint a certain amount of money for the services that they would provide to the people. And also, when they also sell products for that is sacred from the church, products that they would sell would be very expensive that poor people would not be able to avail because of its amount. Next is usurpation of land. So usurpation means to seize and hold possession by force or without right. Anyone who would violate would be sanctioned with a heavy punishment. So these are the lands owned by the people or the villagers, which are taken by force by the church and are claimed as their own. Third is forced labor or polo e servicio. It was employed by Spanish colonizers for over 250 years, which requires forced labor of all Filipino male from 16 to 60 years old of age for 40-day period. During this period, Filipino males were given with heavy tasks and works without a time to rest and without pay. Fourth is racial discrimination, one of the main factors of the dawn of Filipino nationalism. Filipinos were considered as an inferior race and were referred to as Indios. Discrimination was prevalent even in universities, churches, and in literature. The discrimination also manifested itself in the Spanish caste system. The system is a class structure that is determined by birth. First is peninsulares, the highest level of the racial hierarchy in the Philippines. These were the people of pure Spanish descent born in Spain. These people possess maximum command and influence over the Philippines. Second, Americano. Persons of pure Spanish descent living in the who were born in Spanish America were classified as Americano. This was the second highest level of the hierarchy. Third, Filipino or Insulares, basically the Philippine-born children of Americano. Third, Tornatras, person of mixed indigenous Spanish ancestry, Chinese and Malay. Mestizo de Española, people of mixed Filipino and foreign ancestry. Sangley, persons of pure Chinese ancestry, while Mestizo de Sangley was used to refer to a person of mixed Chinese and indigenous ancestry. Indio was the term that used to refer the native Malay. Negrito, black Negro people who possess minimal or zero rights and work as laborers in the Spanish colonial system. Fifth is sexual misconduct. The Philippines during the Spanish period of 3 centuries was a Frailocracy. There are no police records on the sexual misconduct of the friars, for they were above the law. In some cases, friars were known to have used the police to silence and dispose of victims. All that we have, to my knowledge, is Jose Rizal's account of the subject in his 2 novels, The No Limit Tangere and El Filibusterismo. Rizal meant through his novels to expose the abuses of the friars in the Philippines. Much of the sexual conducts of the clergy is told by Rizal in the fashion of a cautious whisper, capturing the repressive nature of the Philippine Frailocracy. Number 6 would be false allegation. Any Filipino who were suspected to be against the Spanish colonization would be planted with false allegations so that they would be executed without any concrete evidence. Lastly is the persecution of Filipino patriots. These are the Filipinos who have revolted against the misconduct of the Spanish colonization. An example of these are Jose Rizal and the GOMBURZA. GOMBURZA refers to the 3 Filipino Catholic priests, namely Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, who were executed in February 17, 1872. They were executed due to the false accusation of treason and sedition, taking a supposed active role in the Cavite Mutiny. They were sentenced to death by garrote in a military court at Bagumbayan Field. And Jose Rizal was convicted of rebellion, conspiracy, and sedition and sentenced to death. He was executed by firing squad in Manila on December 30, 1896 at the age of 35.
Hello everyone, I am Luilin Vimenyaza and I will continue the report about Frailocracy in the Philippines. So, before we can justly say that the friars only brought hardships to the native Filipinos, we must also see the bright side of it. So in 19th century, when the Philippines was under the governance of the friars, even though their abuses were very strong and observable, we can't deny that there are also good things that happened during that time which shaped our culture. The first one is the ways of how Filipinos dress. So long before the colonialization, the natives already had a way of dressing like bahag for males. However, the Westerners introduced a new way of dressing to adapt to the tropical conditions in the Philippines. Also, at this time, the friars introduced new crops, plants, and animals. They set to work also to improve agricultural methods and products from Europe and Mexico. And we also have dye making, bricks, and tile making. Then, the establishment of schools, colleges, universities, hospitals, asylums, and orphanages. They created more than 300 towns, built churches, roads and bridges, and other infrastructure. So they became the carriers of the Western culture. Many friars contributed to the development of the printing press, medicine, science, architecture, music, grammar. We also have dictionaries, literature, and arts. So, Frailocracy ended during the emergence of the Philippine Republic and early part of American occupation. Now, aside from Frailocracy, we also have a popular controversy during the 19th century, which is the secularization. Okay, so during the Spanish colonialization, there were two kinds of priests who served the Catholic Church in the Philippines. So they were the regulars who belonged to the religious order, society, or congregation of priests, while seculars are priests who do not belong to religious order, so they do not take the vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience in the members of religious order, but instead they promise obedience to a diocesan bishop. Okay, so how did secularization began? So the conflict began when the bishops insisted on visiting the parishes that were being run by regular priests. So the regular priests, of course, refused, and they also threatened to abandon their parishes. In 1774, Archbishop Basilio Santa Justa accepted the resignation of the regular priests, since they threatened to abandon their parishes, and then he assigned secular priests to take their place, and since there wasn't enough of them, so the Filipino seculars were also ordained to fill the vacancies. Secularization was implemented in the Philippines under Governor General Simon de Anda, and on November 9, 1774, a royal decree was issued that made this policy official. And the story about secularization will be continued by our next reporter.
Good morning, my name is Carlito Pordalisa Palacios Jr. and I am going to report all about the secularization and why does the regular priests oppose to the policy to the said policy. So first is, as we all know, regulars talks about a person who work in a Catholic church who follow the rule of life. Those rule of life is example of it is to teach people around him of what are the specific rituals and teaching them their religious practices. The policy that was implemented in the Philippines was secularization. In 1774, Royal Cedula made this policy official, but the regulars opposed of this said policy. They against of this said policy because the first reason is that the training of the Filipino priests or regular priests was inadequate, meaning to say that the they are not well trained, or in other words, the skills of the Filipinos are not enough to make to become a priest, or the training of the Filipino priests are not well trained, or in conclusion their quality is not enough to considered as a priest. The second reason is that the Filipinos were brown and not totally white, but the Filipino are brown, not priestly material. We Filipinos mostly the color of our skin is brown. That's the reason why the regular priests opposed to the said policy. And the third one is native priests would one day lead revolts against Spain. So these the regular priests said that we are not we Filipinos are not loyal to them. We can betray them someday. So that's one of the reason why the regular priests opposed to the said policy. And someday the Filipino will we Filipino will against from them. And those are the reason why regulars resisted to the said policy. Monsignor Pedro Pilaes or Pilis or whatever ecclesiastical governor of the church who helped the Filipinos against with the Spanish. GOMBURZA continued to fight the secularization movement after the death of Monsignor. The word secularization is nowadays the preferred term to describe the movement of societies away from the cultural or political dominion of a particular religion or of sometimes competing set of religious beliefs. For example, here in our society, secularization in the society, it causes from the house housing shortage. Housing shortage is one of the reasons why there is a secularization in our society. The multiplicity of the means of transport and communication, the economic problems of our society, the fashion, education, political or urban political and structure, influence of Western culture or urban life, individualism, all of these factors have secularized the urban outlook.
Good day everyone, I am Annalyn Medes. I'll be reporting about secularization now in continuation of the report of Mr. Carlito. So, the Catholic Church have two types of priests, the secular priest and the regular priest. So, as what previous reporter said, that the regular priest was, they belong to religious orders. So, their task was to spread the Christianity. And then, example of this was the Franciscans, the Recollects, the Dominicans, and the Augustinians. On the other hand, the secular priests, they belong to religious orders. They do not belong to religious orders. So, their task was to run the parishes under the supervision of the bishop. So, in addition, also, the secular priest is known as diocesan or archdiocesan, and then the regular priest is known as the religious order priest. So both regular and secular priests often study in the same college and graduate theology schools or university. So they may differ in the mission, vision, spiritual formation, since a regular priest has additional training to order, congregation, or society he belongs to. The secular movement was led by GOMBURZA. So GOMBURZA was the combination of three priest name. A Father Jose Burgos, in which he is the priest from Manila. Father Mariano Gomez de Los Angeles, a priest of Bacoor, and then Father Jacinto Zamora, a priest of Marikina. So yeah, the story of the three priests who was executed in February 17, 1872. Though the first one who died was Father Mariano Gomez de Los Angeles, and then followed by Father Jose Burgos, and then the last is Father Jacinto Zamora. So that's why the GOMBURZA was formed. Yes. And then the three priests was very passionate about establishing the rights of a secular being violated by the friars. And then yes, on February 17, 1872, surrounded by the huge crowd, the execution of the three priests, and then it is the time also that the secularization was destroyed. And then the GOMBURZA was allegedly instigating the Cavite Mutiny. Actually, the three priests were not involved in the mutiny. They hardly even know each other, and what they were, however, were a prominent figures in the secularization movement, in which they wanted to take a church power away from the colonial Spanish and give a native Filipino increased rules in the church affairs. Way back 19th century, the regular priests or clergy did not accept Filipino priests because they saw Filipino as merely assistant only to the Spanish friars. So despite the fact that they don't feel Filipino are capable of this position. But the movement or the secularization movement led by GOMBURZA, they fight for the ability of the Filipino to become a priest and run the parishes. So in my opinion, without the secularization movement, maybe as of maybe at this time, yes, or maybe at the present, we Filipino or Filipino priests don't have an opportunity to get beyond the position of a priest. In conclusion, decoupling of the Catholic Church and Philippine state proved a challenge for the incoming Americans, and who promoted the policy of absolute separation between the church and the state. They also inherited the problem of the Spanish friars, many of whom have no intention of leaving the Philippines. Despite of hostility from the nationalist Filipino, the treaty of the Paris ensured that the order lands ownership, but Filipino politicians pushed for the confiscation and redistribution of this land. So that's all. Thank you.